Turan was stunned, his eyelashes trembling slightly. The words struck him like a thunderbolt. His eyes widened, revealing clear panic and confusion as he repeated the cruel name. The Great House Zahar. You're telling me I'm from the same bloodline as the Elder's enemies? The young man turned his face away, sweat beading on his forehead. He swallowed hard, his heart heavy with torment. What should I say to him? He thought to himself. Should I apologize? But these are the actions of relatives I've never met, who are practically strangers. Seeing the youth drowning in awkwardness, the old wizard called out, his voice much softer. Turan. He answered hesitantly. Elder. The man smiled in relief. Don't make such a worried expression. The older knight stepped forward, placing a hand on Turan's shoulder in a comforting gesture. You didn't participate in that war yourself, he said. Turan still hesitated, softly replying, but still. With a kind smile, he dispelled all the burdens in the boy's heart. It's an adult situation. If we try to wash blood with blood, the fighting will never end. He looked at him with an understanding gaze. Don't you have regrets? Turan asked back in surprise. About what? Standing on the windy grass, facing the distant mountain range, he mused. About telling me to go down the hill. If you go down the mountain and pursue power, you'll inevitably end up joining the Zahar family. He turned to look at Turan. You have outstanding abilities, after all, but I trust your character. The unexpected compliment made Turan blink. Sorry. The man smiled, his voice warm and deep. I'm talking about the goodness in you, since you saved me, even while revealing an identity you'd hidden your whole life. He put his hands in his coat pockets, nodding slightly. Rather, if someone like you joined the Zahar family and rose to a high position within it, perhaps it could prevent such a terrible war from happening again. Turan thought in silence while the man turned away, waving his hand lightly. Well, either way, there's no need to think too seriously about it. After all, it's not like you've decided right now whether or not to join the Zahar family. Hearing this, Turan replied clearly, My thoughts are clear now. The knight turned around in surprise. The wind played with Turan's silver hair as he broke into a bright and confident smile. I want to try going down the mountain. Seeing that determined look, the man replied with satisfaction. You've thought well. He smirked, adding a humorous remark. But not right away. I'll head down once your injury heals, Elder. He chuckled, muttering to himself. How kind. I'm merely a bit scratched. Truly, you're a really good person. In the wooden room bathed in afternoon sunlight through the window, the two sat facing each other. The old wizard began a new lesson. To use magic, you absolutely need mana. He looked at Turan with a serious gaze. That's why mana is commonly called the key to omnipotence. The young man pondered. The key to omnipotence. It's not a truly omnipotent power as the name suggests, he continued to explain. But to use magic, you need mana that matches it. Looking down from above at the tea table, Turan asked, What is the standard for mana that matches magic? The man calmly replied, I'll explain that right now. The difficulty of magic is largely determined by 3 factors. He held up 3 fingers. First is bloodline, second is affinity, and third is causality. The first one, bloodline, is determined by the bloodline you were born with. This applies to most nobles who aren't knights. Pointing to his injured arm, he gave a practical example. For example, it would be difficult for you to heal my wounds with magic, right? Turan admitted, yes. The wall displayed a map of the continent and a family crest. He continued in a low voice, but for the Revista bloodline from the south, it's something they can do even without training. That's a power that comes from bloodline. Setting his wooden mug down on the table, Turan asked about the second factor. What about the second one? Affinity? He explained. You can also think of it as familiarity. It's the concept that a mage can more easily perform tasks that they prefer or are used to. Turan recalled the recent fierce battle, confidently sharing his experience with a smirk. Like how I made a fireball as if I was throwing a rock. The man standing by the window nodded in confirmation. Correct. He turned around, explaining further about the power of the attack. Probably, if you had simply made flames, you wouldn't have achieved that speed or firepower. Pointing at the wooden mug, he emphasized. And the last one is most important, causality. Even I don't fully understand it. The room fell silent, the light casting their shadows on the wooden floor. He suddenly posed a hypothetical situation. What would happen if you tried to kill me directly using mana? Turan thought for a moment and replied, probably some light would shine from my head and that would be it? A magical light flashed on the rim of the mug as he gently placed his hand on the metal cup. That's exactly the phenomenon that occurs from a lack of causality. A spark of electricity flashed through the gap. As he lifted his hand, bubbles fizzed up with a spark of lightning. When there's no appropriate cause for a desired outcome, and when what needs to be achieved is excessively difficult, that's when this applies. Turan sat with his knees pulled up, listening attentively. I think I understand what causality is a bit. He pieced the facts together. If I wanted to kill you, rather than spending mana wishing for death, I would need to provide a cause of death, like creating and shooting flames, right? Because creating and shooting fire is more natural than directly lighting one, he said cheerfully. Turan smiled triumphantly, holding out his hands to conjure a fireball hovering right over the wooden mug. Exactly. Seeing the young man learn so quickly, the old wizard lightly pumped his fist, his face radiant with excitement. You could have become a scholar instead of a mage. But Turan's triumph quickly gave way to curiosity. But I can control ordinary animals as I wish, so why is it that magical beasts need something like that? The knight gently explained, that's because of their mana. The scene shifted outside the peaceful wooden cabin, where the sheep were leisurely grazing. Turan crossed his arms, thoughtfully admitting, magic isn't easy, huh? He rubbed his chin, looking serious. The wizard smiled, reminding him of the true nature of a magic user. An excellent mage knows not just how to use mana, but the principles and situations behind it as well. Suddenly remembering the young man's true identity, he asked, now that I think of it, does the Zahar bloodline also have special magic? Turan replied without hesitation. They're skilled in stealth and tracking. Curiosity evident on his face. The wizard stepped back, gesturing for Turan. Try it once. The boy nodded. Okay. Turan closed his eyes, calming his mind and chanting the spell. I don't want to be seen by others. I wish neither sound nor smell could be detected. A faint white mist began to emanate from his body. Turan channeled his mana to conceal his presence, gradually blending into his surroundings. The old knight stood in the middle of the room, his eyes reflecting a mix of anticipation and concern, and called out softly, Did it work? After a moment of no response, he glanced around the empty room, noticing the absolute silence. A smile of admiration tugged at his lips, a smile full of respect. You succeeded. He blinked, scanning every corner but finding nothing, and finally confirmed aloud, I can't see you. The knight swallowed hard, straining his eyes to look into the empty space before him, trying to find even the slightest trace. The wooden room, filled with familiar objects, was unusually silent. Suddenly, a faint glow appeared in thin air, and the atmosphere began to waver intensely. Turan's figure slowly materialized from nothingness, like a magical painting being drawn in reality. The young man stood there, graceful and calm, flawlessly removing his invisible disguise. Turan looked down at his hand, feeling the remnants of the dissipated magic, and gently clenched his fist. It's been a while since I've seen it, but it's still a frightening ability, the old knight remarked, his eyes reflecting wariness. During the war, the Arabian knights feared that ability most. He sighed, a half-smile tinged with bitterness on his lips. This seems like an unfairly powerful ability. The young man frowned, pondering the power he held. The knight patted his shoulder, his voice warm as he reminded him. But keep in mind it's not invincible. Now then, I'll teach you a few magic training methods. Hearing this, Turan shot him a meaningful glance, retorting, Aren't you teaching too much to an enemy family's mage? The old knight smiled kindly, responding to Turan's teasing with heartfelt sincerity. You saved my life and even treated me. And didn't I tell you? I trust your character. His face shone with absolute trust, devoid of any doubt. Later, the scene shifted to the familiar pasture. The village chief gaped, his eyes wide with astonishment, sweating profusely as he heard the shepherd's sudden decision. He yelled in panic. What? You're selling the sheep and leaving? Then who's going to do the shepherding from now on? Turan stood there, wearing a long white coat, his belongings neatly packed on his shoulders, ready for a long journey. The clear blue sky and tiled roof houses seemed to witness his determination. The village chief angrily pointed at his face, loudly scolding him. How can you just decide something like that without consulting us? Turan sighed softly, closing his eyes wearily at the annoyance. You guys should figure out how to find a shepherd yourselves. How does it matter to you what I do with my belongings? He opened his eyes, looking directly at the greedy village chief. Anyway, I hope you'll buy the sheep at a fair price. Otherwise, I'm going to release them all and leave. The village chief flinched, stepping back and stammering. Turan coldly added, You're free to capture them, but you'll probably have quite a hard time doing it. A villager standing behind stuttered, The village chief. The village chief gritted his teeth in frustration, sweat pouring down his face. He thought to himself, This bastard is someone who keeps his word. There's nothing that will come from irritating him. Although reluctant, he had to give in. Fine, I get it. His rough hand tightly grasped the pouch of coins and angrily tossed it towards the young man. Leave or stay, do whatever you want, he grumbled helplessly. Turan and the knight walked along the dirt path, leaving behind the peaceful village he had been attached to. Holding the pouch of coins he just received, Turan glanced at the knight walking beside him. Now that I think of it, he spoke up, those villagers, they still owe you compensation after everything. Should I go collect it? The knight chuckled softly, shaking his head at the kind offer. I had no intention of receiving it, and it was you who caught the magical beast, wasn't it? Turan smiled slightly in agreement. All right. He looked towards the distant horizon, his tone tinged with a bit of melancholy. Then now, they stopped at a crossroads. We must part ways here, Turan said, his eyes filled with a hint of sadness. I'm sorry for refusing your offer to travel together. The knight smiled gently, his smile holding a deep understanding. I'm more comfortable alone. He warmly eased the young man's guilt. Not at all. Turan smiled sincerely. Thank you for everything. The knight nodded slightly, his eyes full of lingering affection. Turan, take care. Elder, Turan called out, a bright smile blossoming on his lips. I hope we can meet again with smiling faces. The knight's back gradually faded on the sunlit path, and so the boy watched Kiorn's retreating figure for a long time. Only later did he realize why he didn't want the old knight to speak to him formally. Although he never lacked affection from his mother, deep down, the boy had secretly been yearning for a father figure. The image of the mother and son walking hand in hand among the sheep suddenly flashed in his memory. He had always longed for someone who could be a role model. For what kind of man the boy should become. The arid wasteland with steep rocky canyons stretched out under the glaring sun. Turan walked silently alone on the dusty path. Suddenly, the dry wind carried strange sounds. He stopped, gently raised his hand to pull back his hood, and squinted to observe. A sharp look flashed in his eye as he spotted figures in the distance. He thought to himself, someone is here. In the distance, a group of heavily cloaked people pulling a cart was trudging across the sand. Looking at their appearance, Turan wondered in his mind, are they traveling merchants that go from village to village? He stepped forward, approaching the group. He felt lucky to encounter passers-by in this desolate area. Good, let's ask for directions. Turan approached and blocked their path. The leader, a heavily bearded man with an eye patch, frowned and shouted, Who are you to block our path? Turan maintained a polite demeanor and replied, I'm traveling alone. May I ask about the nearest city? The eye patch man pointed behind him. If you follow the road we came from, you'll reach a city called Muriai. Turan nodded slightly and turned to leave. I see. Thank you for telling me. But just as he took a step, the man stepped forward, blocking his way with a threatening tone. Wait. The eye patch man smirked, revealing a cunning and sly smile. You're just going to leave after getting information? Turan turned his head, his eyes indifferent and fearless. What? He calmly asked. Then, as soon as he spoke, the men around him drew their swords, the blades gleaming under the sun. The leader growled, showing his true colors. If you receive something, you should give something in return. The accomplices standing behind Turan smiled menacingly. Weapons ready. The eye patch man ordered. First, take off that bulging bag. Turan glanced at them, calmly uttering, Bandits? Exposed. The leader didn't flinch, resting his sword on his shoulder with an arrogant look. So what if we are bandits? Let's call it recklessness. He looked around the desolate land, threatening, This is a wasteland where no one would find it strange if someone died. Right? Take off your bag and cloak yourself while we're being nice. Killing you and stripping you down would get unnecessarily bloody and take a lot of work. A sword was held close to Turan's neck, but he remained perfectly still. Threatened with his life, Turan's demeanor showed no panic. Instead, his eyes turned sharp and cold. "I see," he whispered. The bandit glared ruthlessly, adding, "Bandits who even kill people." In that moment, Turan's mind flashed back to the magic lessons the old knight Kiorn had taught him in the small wooden cabin, from creating a fireball as easily as throwing a rock to the complex theories of combat practice. Back in the present, Turan slowly drew his weapon, the corner of his lips curling into a sharp, confident smile. He looked up at the bandits, boldly declaring, "I'll have to use you guys for practice."